In order, would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public comments? Rob, Randy, any comments from the public? No? Okay. All right. Review of the agenda for upcoming City Council URA Board on meeting on February 2nd. First item is discussion regarding indoor marijuana-related business regulations. Who's handling this? Jim?
We've got Carolyn.
Carolyn? There
Good
you are.
evening.
Hi.
How are you tonight? We're coming to you as a follow-up to a couple of sessions that the council had back in late 2020 regarding a section of the marijuana business zoning code regulations. Specifically, we were talking about the 1,000-foot requirement distance between marijuana businesses and between marijuana businesses and residential uses. So we're bringing this back to you tonight at your request to discuss this in a forum, and we would be here to answer what you might have. If there were questions about public notifications, I can jump to those right off. We notified folks within the 1,000 feet that we identify in the code here, and they went out with mailers, and we also notified folks with our newsletter. So that being said, we're here to open it up for your discussion. Roger and Jim may have some comments as well, but this is what we're looking at.
So is there any comments? I think we've had the discussion on this. And so this would be the time, I guess, council and anyone else that wants to make some comments about this. I think it's something that we need to do. And we also had talked about if we have existing places at the moment that are within 1,000 feet, they were going to be grandfathered in. Is that correct, Nate, Roger? Okay.
John, I think you have to.
Yeah, so we don't have to worry about existing places, just anything new. So, which I think is appropriate, but I'm not sure everyone else feels. But if they don't feel that way, I guess we need to give staff some direction here.
I have a question. This is kind of easing restrictions, isn't it? Like, for instance, if you look at the Boogie Bank building, there's residential being put on the second floor. If a marijuana business wanted to go on the first floor, as it's written now, it would be denied, but as you're proposing, it would be allowed, correct?
If the way it's written now, the business would not be able to go in because it would be within 1,000 feet of the marijuana business.
So with the changes, it would be allowed? Isn't the new changes say industrial area?
Where it changed, they would be allowed, right?
So let me give some context here. When we first went into this, I think it was prior to the 2017 code amendment and the upgrades, and downtown was commercial district.
Right.
And then when 2017 came, when we did the code amendments, that was prior to 2017, we included not just commercial, we called it a mixed-use zone, which allowed residential. We've always had residential downtown. I believe the actual code change that changed it, that says industrial only, was really for marijuana processing and not marijuana dispensaries. And I think that's where the mix is coming in. I do know that there are some on the council that have very strong feelings about having marijuana dispensaries anywhere close to where residential's at. So I think what you really just need to decide is, do you want to have a hardline rule that if you have residential in the district, that you're not going to allow marijuana dispensary, future ones, or are you just going to keep it out of strict residential zones? I think that's really the question.
Well, I think it should be all residential and any schools, period. That's my feeling. So if it's mixed use or whatever, I don't think there should be any marijuana dispensaries, is my feeling.
And the other issue then, combined with that, is when we allowed marijuana processing, and we did that because there was a prohibition from us getting our share of the state tax revenue.
Correct.
We then said those businesses couldn't be closer than 1,000 feet next to each other. That's really the only business that we tell that they can't be closer to each other than 1,000 feet. And that's been extended now to all marijuana businesses. And we have had different planning directors. We've had 3 during this interim.
Sure.
And so there's different ways of interpreting it.
So my apologies, because I thought this was going to be strictly industrial and I wasn't paying attention. So I feel that we shouldn't have this within any residential area within 1,000 feet. That would be my take.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, that would include mixed-use areas.
Yes. So for instance, if someone wanted to put a facility down below Tioga, it would not be allowed. What I would like is my take. But anyway, I'm not sure.
This clearly says, nor within 1,000 feet of any residential use in any zone.
So a simple fix to that, if they just want to change it to 500 feet, then you're still,
Because I think 1,000 feet's a long distance. Is that the standard, Carolyn, with the state?
This is not a state requirement.
Okay.
This is more restrictive than the state requirement.
And I think that's why Carolyn was bringing this to our attention, is that we are far stricter than the state requirement now.
I have no problem. I mean, that's me, but I'm not sure how the rest of the council is. And if I'm in the minority, I'm in the minority.
Out of curiosity, just as an example, currently, I think it's Sky High downtown near the Hall building.
Yes.
I believe that's residential right above it, isn't it?
It was, when the council before adopted and allowed marijuana dispensaries, because before we had an ordinance that we couldn't give a business license to anybody that didn't obey federal law. And so that it would completely cut out dispensaries. When we did allow and made an exception, we said we wouldn't make it any stricter than the current rules of the state. And so at that time, it was purely schools and I believe residential districts. But you know, residential districts, that's changed a couple times because of the legislature.
Well, and you can't do a strictly residential district anymore, can you? Or we don't.
Well, I think we don't allow, normally we don't allow commercial in residential districts unless it's a home occupation.
Oh.
But I'm going outside of my field of expertise, to be honest with you.
Just to pose a question, I'm not saying that I agree with this, but is there some merit to having marijuana businesses clustered together as opposed to separating them and spreading them all over the town?
I was thinking that too.
I don't know that that's the problem, to be honest with you, because I think the market's gonna weed out, that's probably bad. Sorry.
Establish a green
I
light
think the
district?
market will take care of that, because we don't say banks can't be close together, we don't say grocery stores can't be close together. But if let's just say that you said it could only be in the industrial district, then I think they need to be closer together, because we don't have that much industrial land.
So right now it says that manufacturers or processing can only be in industrial, but they have to be 1,000 feet apart?
And I think that was a different issue, and that was a safety issue. At the time, when that came into play, some of the marijuana processing experiences across this state and other states, they deal with volatile chemicals.
Yeah.
And some that processed hashish, they had some very large fires and explosions.
Oh,
And so that's why it was industrial, and that's why you didn't want them too close together.
I see.
Didn't want a chain reaction type event.
Gotcha.
And that was really based off of advice from your fire chief.
Okay. that makes sense. I was just,
So what businesses are we talking about here? This says marijuana-related business. That could be processing or retail sales. What are we talking about?
Well, I think in my opinion, and Carolyn, you maybe should chime in, I really think we need to differentiate the two. You have your marijuana-related, when we talked about marijuana-related businesses before, it was those processors and manufacturers. But we still didn't allow growing, but that could be considered there. We still don't allow growing in the city. But then you have your dispensaries, and I think that's different. I think that's retail.
I do think there needs to be a distinction, and there needs to be two sets of regulations. Because this can't be a one-size-fits-all, because they're totally different things.
And I think that's where it's got us to this problem, where it's become a one-size-fits-all, where you have your middle group, your people that do your manufacturing and your suppliers versus your distributors or your retail outlets.
So is there a good argument for not allowing the growing? I know we don't allow growing right now, but with the kinds of facilities that they can build now, with indoor growing and that sort of thing, is it something that we want to prohibit?
And I think that's a good question. I think back in time when there was a prohibition for agricultural, it was more of a land use issue. It was you didn't want to devote precious land to agricultural use within your city boundaries, when that really should be set aside for either industrial, residential, or commercial districts.
But with the demand for industrial lands and uses going way down, what if someone wanted to do a hydroponic farm and do tomatoes, or whatever? Inside of buildings like that, you can generate some product.
I do know other cities have changed their code to allow indoor grows.
I would definitely like to hear from the public on that particular topic, because I know where there were some larger indoor operations that many times, many days out of the year in a residential area, because I would visit the home nearby, it was a very strong smell of marijuana, as if somebody were smoking it in the home. It was I think we really need to take a look at that, even though it was indoor and it was supposed to be limited.
Yeah.
It was
I think
very
it's a
strong.
discussion that's worth having.
Yeah. I think that it does have impacts on neighborhoods, even if we don't think that it does. I think that's something that,
So for purposes of discussion, if we were discussing and splitting this, I think it should be split from just what I've heard. So we'll say any processor needs to be in the industrial zone. I mean, that's what I always thought. And they need to be 1,000 feet away, I guess, from each other for safety purposes. And then to Stephanie's point and Phil's about the growing, I think we could always bring that back and have some public hearing and decide whether we could include that in that industrial zone also. But then the dispensaries, I guess we need to determine what we want to do as far as residential in those areas. So I'm still of the opinion that for the dispensaries, that they should be not in any residential or school district, period. So I feel, within 1,000 feet, so whatever.
Yeah. It might be hard for some of the downtown areas, but we already have some.
Well, I mean, we have quite a few already.
Yeah,
downtown.
but let's say one of them goes out of business, or several of them go out of business, then would there be none in the downtown district?
Well, we still got them on 101 there and some others, I mean, and I don't think that's a problem, but I think in residential, I think it could be. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
May I interject, Mayor? I had a question I wanted to ask. The way it's written now, it talks about being the 1,000 feet is, nor within 1,000 feet of any residential use in any zone. If the intent is to take the opportunity for this to be outside of the residential zones at all, within 1,000 feet, you could just say 1,000 feet, nor within 1,000 feet of any residential zone. That way, if you wanted to allow this in your mixed use areas and residential units up above, because you are encouraging people to live downtown, you could still do that. So that's another option you could think about. It would be out of your residential zones, but it could still potentially be in the downtown area. New ones could be in the downtown area where there's living units upstairs.
Yeah, so there's some areas that they could still be downtown that wouldn't meet that criteria.
Well, I'm starting to think about it, and, you know, the one on 101 by 7-Eleven, that one would not work. The one below the hall building wouldn't work. The one below,
But the one, anything along where 101 Bay Appliance, that area, the one that's on the corner of Curtis and 10 Bay Shore, that would work. There's no residential.
Where at?
It's on the Curtis and Bay Shore, it's right on the corner there,
yeah,
right behind Suman's.
yep, there's that one.
But the second story of a lot of those buildings along in there are, residential uses are allowed,
They're allowed, but they're not there yet.
but they're allowed.
Well,
By
So
code.
so
But
how do
until
we
resi-
define this?
Well, until residential goes in, it's just an empty shell up there, it could turn into anything,
Well,
so.
we are,
So if they turn it into residential, are these places automatically not allowed after they turn them into
They're
residential?
grandfathered in until,
So that, I mean, that's my, you
They're
get-
empty shells, but are they zoned residential? Because I think that's where you,
are we talking zoning residential?
that's
Carolyn?
what she's saying,
Yeah,
like, if
zoning
you go, you
residential.
could go
No.
zone, residential zones, or you could go any residence. And yeah, I think maybe potentially any residence would severely limit the ability to have somebody open up a business. If, let's say, some of the businesses that we already have go out of business, then they start, you know, somebody else moves in and they're just like, well, there's no place to do it. 'Cause, you know,
Except
Coney Station-
it's already written that way now, that they can't be within 1,000 feet of any residential use.
That's what we're talking about, but we haven't put this into
No,
action.
this one's already in. That's the
It
one
is.
that's already
It's
in.
I just don't
reducing
think
it
that
to
was, it was
500.
intended to be that way.
Yeah.
But
okay.
that example that you mentioned, Mayor, I bet if you draw a straight line from that shop to the Buggy Bank building where there is a residential use, that's less than 1,000 feet.
From the, where, Curtis?
Yeah.
I doubt it,
Draw a line.
I doubt it, but
And
it's all right.
also,
As a
there's,
crow flies?
there's residential up above the Coney Station, so
yeah.
Oh, that's true.
it's right there.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it would severely limit any of it in downtown.
You would almost wipe out the entire
I
downtown.
think,
well, anyway, I don't have a problem with that, but I'm not sure how the rest of you feel. Because I think there's enough around the outlining areas that suffice, so that's me. But anyway,
well, the two on the outskirts of 101 that I can think of, both of them are right near residences.
the one by the Red Lion,
The one by the Red Lion, the one that's a little bit farther down by, there's a gas station, let's see, which one is that? Yeah, it's over by the gas station that's being built over there by the chip pile. That might be North
That's
Bend.
not-
Yeah,
That's
and
what-
and it's no longer open.
It's no longer open.
The state closed that one down.
Okay.
they did?
Yeah, and that's outside of our city.
That's outside.
Yeah.
But the one over by 7-Eleven on the south end of town is right near residences.
It is, but that's outside the city too.
That's outside
Oh,
too.
it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
not till you get on,
We don't
on
cross
the
the
bridge, on this side of the bridge, or you,
Oh,
by
okay.
Fred Meyer's.
So they're just outside of it. Okay, well.
But the ones in Empire, such as.
I was gonna say Empire might be
King Cannabis is right in front of apartments.
next door.
And I believe the other one, over by Bayburger Inn will be, within 1,000 feet of, residence. Pretty much anywhere you go in Empire, would be within 1,000 feet of residential uses.
Yeah.
Maybe we should consider cutting it down to 500, because one of the things we're looking at is the intent of it. If the intent and belief is that having a marijuana facility within a certain distance or on top or below a residential zone, whether it's been developed or not. The express belief is that it would impinge upon the development of that residential site or upon the desirability of that residential site. So regardless of whether it is inhabited as residential or not yet, it would be interfering with potential residential capacity. But if we cut it down to 500 feet, they would be able to build in more accessible places without being on top of or next to potential residential developments.
Yeah.
So but I guess if we just left it the way it is, then it's within 1,000 feet, right?
As it's written now, we wouldn't be able to allow any more in the, that's either within 1,000 feet of a school, 1,000 feet of another marijuana business, or 1,000 feet of any residential use.
And the processors, where are they allowed?
They're still industrial, but technically, if we leave it as is now, we have to say any new marijuana dispensaries have to be an industrial. And we could get you a map of industrial, there's just not very many places. And a couple of those are actually have residential uses in them.
So I'm just curious, did we hear from any people, any retailers that, I mean, they're really the people that know how this is gonna impact them either positively or negatively.
The only one I heard from was the owner of Herbal Choices, and he was concerned because he was hoping, he purchased the building where at 4th and Commercial, which has the barber shop and the business next door, and he fixed up the roof, and he was planning to put, I understood his office is there, but he's never went and got his permit to open up a shop there. So he couldn't put it there, one, because he's going to be within 1,000 feet of a residential use, plus he's within 1,000 feet of another marijuana shop.
Just to put his offices there, or,
Oh, I think he wants to do more than that.
and that's right next to Pacific School of Dance too.
Mhm. So I think if you could make some, is there agreement that you don't want any type of marijuana business within 1,000 feet of a school? The state, I believe, has a different distance requirement. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought, Carolyn, I thought it was 500 feet.
I think she said 500 feet, but she's frozen.
Carolyn, is the state's distance requirement for marijuana businesses from schools, is that 500 feet? You're muted.
I'm sorry, I believe it is. I think if you want to go in the direction of whatever the state requires, we would just want to refer to the state code section. So if they change it to 1,000 or 300 or 5, whatever they change it to, then we would be okay. If that's one of your goals, is to be consistent with the state limits.
Yeah, I was fairly certain when this first came out by the state, it was 1,000 feet.
Yeah, and I think that's how we ended up drafting this, isn't it, because of it? And then we allowed the processors in because we weren't able to collect any tax because of it.
Yeah.
And so that was just a reactionary decision, I guess. So,
And you do have the unintended consequences if you make it more difficult, or there's less, at the end of the day, there's less processors or less marijuana-related businesses, it will have a budgetary impact on the city.
how much? It wasn't much, I thought.
Locally now,
Pardon?
it's more significant. The states, we're gonna lose the state portion because of the new House bill, but, locally, and it's just gonna look, but I think we're upwards of 100,000 in a year, so.
100,000?
Yeah, it's significant now.
I mean, it's not enough to pay for one police officer position, but it's starting to get pretty close.
All right, council, what do you want to do?
I know this is a difficult one, and if you would like, we could come back and maybe sort this out a little bit and categorize it into specific questions that maybe you could answer one at a time, and then that would help us get direction.
I'd like to know exactly what the state says. If we just follow what the state says, what would that mean? I'd really like to know that.
And how would that look in our community?
Right.
I love the maps that you've done when we did the homeless work group, where we could see where daycares. I mean, just the Episcopal Church has a preschool in it, which is, what, 300 feet roughly from that corner we were just talking about. So I don't know if that qualifies as a school, but it is a school.
I think it does, but I can't remember for certain. I do know it has to be established, already established, and they do the same thing. They don't make a business move if a new daycare is established.
I don't know if anyone else would be interested in it, but I'd be curious to see a map that restricts within 1,000 feet of a school and then restricts within 500 feet of residential, contrasted against 1,000 and 1,000.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's a good idea. Does everyone agree with that?
yeah.
So the other thing, though, do we all agree that processors should be in the industrial area?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like, yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
All right, so there's that
So-
fact.
And I would just, I would suggest that you lump in processors and manufacturers. Processors
Growers.
might be someone that's already processing cut marijuana, but a manufacturer might be someone that's making edibles.
True, okay. So we agree
All
with
that needs to be in
manufacturers?
industrial, yeah.
Yep, okay.
What about grow operations?
Well, I mean, do we want to consider grow operations now, or do we want to do a little bit more, I mean, we can, that's up to you guys.
Well, I think if you open that up, you have to look at the bigger picture, as Councilor Monitor's talking about. It's not just grow
Yeah.
operations for marijuana, but you have your grow for your others. And I don't know that there's a big market for it, but I just say, I'd be concerned about the unintended consequences.
Yeah, so why don't, if everyone's all right, we'll take that on at another time, the growing, okay?
I think so, yeah. That's a good idea.
So you're saying if somebody's making chocolates, they have to be in the industrial zone then?
Well,
If it's marijuana-laced chocolates, yeah, it has to be an industrial zone.
right.
What is our industrial zone? I mean, I guess I'd like to see included in the maps an industrial zone map.
Okay?
Just,
Take that.
You know where most everything down around DMV, that's all industrial.
yeah. Is that it though?
Pretty much. I mean, there might be
That's the
some,
bulk of it.
isn't there some out in Empire?
I was gonna say,
Past
there's
the
probably
Hollering
some out
place
in
if you go north?
Yeah.
There is.
I
There
believe,
is. And there's also waterfront industrial as well. So we can show you both.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, and I believe there's actually some industrial on Ocean Boulevard.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? I think there
I
is.
think you're right too. Right down there by Umpqua.
So we can get you the 3 different maps
Okay.
on that,
The old-
and we can
the
break
old
out
platform
and provide you
around
maybe a
Northeast
matrix
Highway.
of state
That's
law
industrial.
and what our code says, and give you some options to consider as you consider continued working through this. At this point in time, I think you have a moratorium, if I'm not mistaken, Carolyn, about we're not citing any new marijuana businesses at this time until you work this out.
Is that all right with everyone?
I'm fine with that.
Yep.
Okay.
You already
How long
have
was that in effect for? Was that March, that moratorium?
I think that moratorium was to be complete, wasn't it March
I think so.
1st? I think that's coming up pretty fast.
So what we can do, and my thoughts, Jim and Carolyn, is that we reschedule this for the next work session, and then at that time, you may have to consider extending that.
Okay.
So,
Everyone all right?
have you had any requests to open a business during this time, during this moratorium?
I've only had one inquiry, but I don't, and that was from Mr. Deathridge. But I don't know if, Carolyn, can you advise if we've had any?
No, I've been asking, and I'm not hearing from the front office that we have. We did have one member of the public who had some strong feelings about this, and I'm hopeful that he submitted a letter or he's there this evening for you to hear from him.
So we delayed this discussion for the purpose of getting community input. Is Herbal Choices the only person you've ever heard from since we started discussing this?
It was, and it was early on, after, when you put the moratorium on. Other than the citizen that contacted Carolyn.
What kind of?
We notified folks, yeah, all these folks were notified of your meeting this evening.
There were hundreds of letters that went out
Okay.
noticing.
Oh, really?
Okay, but the public noticing, how far-reaching was that? Because I think when we're talking about residential, they might have a strong opinion if they know There's
I
a
got
potential.
one.
You got a.
We went within that 1,000-foot range of all the different businesses.
So what we could do to increase that is we could put something together for a Friday update early for maybe not this week, but maybe next week.
Okay.
And then include that to say that we're continuing, that you're wrestling with these ideas and how to move forward.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Be good.
That way we ensure that they, we've done our due process of notifying the public that may be impacted by this. Of course, they may not respond, but until it's at the point where a decision is going to be made,
Yep.
or
Good
after.
idea.
Yep,
But at least
Okay.
we've tried to do our due diligence.
No, that's good.
very good.
All right, everyone agree? We'll move forward in that process? Okay. B, consideration of Parks Commission recommendation of additional park safety and sanitary measures. Is this you, Jim?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The city staff and the Parks Commission have gotten complaints from citizens regarding issues in both Mingus and Empire Lakes or John Toppet's Park. There at Mingus, it has to do with the existing restrooms on the westerly side of 10th Street there, down at the south end of the park. They're kind of hidden away, and there's been a lot of vandalism to those. It's a regular occurrence for Randy and the crew to clean up. And then it's in such a position that you have very poor sight visibility. You can't see what's going on there. And so the Parks Commission is recommending, in this case, that those restrooms be shut down until such time that we replace them, and put temporarily portable restrooms and a hand wash station in their place. It probably actually would save the city a little bit of money on a monthly basis for operation and maintenance if we were to shut down those and put in temporary facilities.
Where would those be located?
Randy, would they be in the same area?
Near where the restrooms are now. So somewhere out there where the bathrooms and the restrooms are currently, that's where we would place it with a wash station, an ADA restroom and a standard, and a wash station. Purpose is, right now, staff and part-time services, we're cleaning them 2 to 3 times a day, 5 times a week to keep them clean. In the morning when we get there, they are so nasty, we have to close them and sometimes have to repaint the walls because the sanitation is that bad. So Parks Commission made a recommendation to close them and place those temporary units.
And then the other thing that the Parks Commission is requesting you consider is putting some gates in at Toppet's Park to off of Ackerman and Hull to prevent folks from driving in to the park when it's closed, because it's closed from dusk till dawn.
And just to kind of enlighten a little bit on that too as well, we had a pretty good park host working in that park this past year, but she became very, very unsecure. She came in and seen me and said, hey, I cannot be in this environment anymore because I got cars coming down here after hours and then the foot traffic that's going into the park. So what we were talking about, since she left, what we done is bumped up the restroom service by using temp. And since the person that was a park host in that park, she wasn't free. I mean, you had electrical services for the RV, you had water for the RV. So if you look at the utilities roundabout, they're around about $200 to $300 a month is what they were getting in that benefit for keeping the restroom clean. So we would rather put that into a gate to secure the premises during the nighttime and then have staff clean the restroom on a regular basis with temp services. And it's kind of a wash on that.
So, Randy, I know I'd asked you the question, but I'll ask it for the aid of the council. Who would be in charge of unlocking and locking the gates?
Sure. talked with a local security company, and they would be willing to unlock our restrooms, our gates, morning of our hours of operation in the evening. And then during the day, we would just secure it for $1,500, $1,600 a month. And it's pretty much a wash. Any other questions?
Anyone? Are we in agreement with the
So,
recommendation?
Yeah, I do have a question on that. So her concern was with people also walking in. What kind of security do we have?
And
For
she was
that.
more secure, she was more worried about the vehicle traffic after hours. In the daylight, when people are coming and going, she would just move herself in the RV and then go into the bathroom and clean it when everybody was gone. Other than that, she never even went out on the trails because she didn't feel safe.
So it's not getting as much foot traffic?
It's more,
as night-
yeah, it's
or
after
daytime.
hours.
Okay.
So I think the gates would help prevent some of the camping in vehicles in the parks, but I think it would be beneficial to also hear from Deputy Chief Chapinar as to security, because taking that away also prevents them from coming in at least through the normal accesses to the park. I know there are other ways we can get on, they can get on the trails at other entrances and get into the park with a vehicle.
Is the police department still patrolling around that park? I know years ago, when I did an overnight ride, we did.
Yeah, we still patrol in that area. I mean, the gates would definitely limit the normal access into the parks, but it would also provide a sense of security into the parks as well. I think obviously we would want to be able to have access into those gates to where if we do need to get in there and do some patrolling, we can. And I know that that would be something that we already talked about with Randy, we would be able to do that, so.
You can add
We're-
that on.
Yeah, I think, yeah, as far as the police department, we're in support of having that.
So these are going to be automatic gates then?
You can do, the ones that we were proposing here was, there's a lock, manual lock, but, you know, $200 more, you can automatic lock on these days.
I think it'd be for the police, automatic locks or automatic openers?
They're automatic lock openers, basically, you got a remote control, move it, opens it up.
I think for the police it'd be a little bit better, but
Yes.
that's my take.
Yeah.
Do we currently have any gates that are locking access areas throughout the city, or?
We have a lot of gates on the shops, so you punch your code in, opens up the gate.
Have we checked to see with other parks, like maybe county or state, if they've had increased vandalism on those gates or fencing?
I can actually, from Bend, Oregon, we put gates on all of our
Okay.
facilities.
You didn't have increased vandalism against them? Okay.
So I assume that it would be the responsibility of the security company to get vehicles that are already down there out of there before?
No, they would be responsible for relocating. What they would do is alert one of us or PD and just say, hey, we got somebody illegal down here.
If we were to move forward, I'd just like to let staff investigate costs and make a determination based on budget availability, which gates we use.
Okay.
I'm a little concerned about the price.
So you could get those costs and maybe have them available at the council meeting, or not?
We certainly could, or we could just share that with you, like I do with my other updates.
Okay.
That sounds good.
It all makes sense to me. I just had one more question on Mingus Park. Will the bathrooms over by the ball field remain open?
Yes.
Okay. I visited not too long ago, and because of the conditions of the bathrooms and the activity that was on around there during the day, I opted to take my granddaughter over to the other one, because again, it is more visible.
Those facilities will only be open when the facility is open to play, otherwise they will be closed.
So they'll be closed during the daytime?
During the daytime, they're open for facility use when it's in facility use.
So when the ball field's open,
So they will not be.
is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Sorry, Randy.
So I understand correct, it's just when the ball field is in use?
Correct.
The other part, I would add that, closing the bathrooms until they're replaced, I mean, that actually is a plan, and there's been designs done. We're just waiting for grant opportunities to open up so we can apply for those. I think the PD would probably also support closing those bathrooms. We've had crimes over time that's occurred, and part of that, I believe, above and beyond criminal mischief, is because of the seclusion of those bathrooms. And so I would support wherever we put the temporary bathrooms, that they're visible from the street.
I've been going to those bathrooms since I was a little kid, and I can tell you they were creepy back then, too.
So I
right.
think we have direction, and of course, you can give us some idea of your consensus, because this is a work session, you can't make formal decisions, but this is well within my spending authority, so we don't need to bring this back to a formal decision of the council.
Is everyone all right with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a sign of the times, I think,
Okay.
unfortunately.
If there's nothing else on B, we'll go to C, discussion regarding the development of a sports complex. Is this Jim again?
Yes, I'll start off with it anyhow. The Parks Commission would like to have a joint work session with the City Council to talk about the concept of the sports complex, if it's something that council's interested in having them pursue. And there's also, they've heard from a business person in the community regarding a possible public-private partnership using one of the city's ball fields, and they'd like to just discuss that concept with you. And the next work session that's available is, I think it's February 23rd.
Are these two separate ideas, or?
They are.
Yeah.
And I would just add that in your Parks Master Plan, it outlines how many ball fields we should have, how many ball fields we'll need in 10 years, how many ball fields we'll need in 20 years. And it's no secret that we have more players than we have ball fields available now. And so I think the Parks Commission is following through on their charge with the Parks Master Plan to look at how do we try and meet the needs as outlined in the Parks Master Plan. So that's one part. And then you have this separate proposal from a local business owner who would like to do a long-term lease with the city and take over the management of the softball field. Part of that would be, though, that he would actually improve the softball fields with new fences, new lights, expand it. That would take out the one tennis court that's not really being used as a tennis court. But that has some other things, and he would have to be, he would work with the softball association about their use. But it's something different, and I think, if I understand right, the Parks Commission really wants, they've heard the proposal, but they would really like to discuss it with you, to vet some of this out a little bit, to see if it's even something worth pursuing. And it seems to be appropriate to talk about that and this other idea about a sports complex.
Is the sports complex idea coming from the group that approached us a year or two, or
don't
anything
believe
like
so.
that?
No.
Because that was pretty involved.
It was. At the end of the day, we still couldn't get access to the site. So that one really fell by the wayside.
So is this just being preemptive, or we have somebody interested in doing this?
No, this would be the city doing it, and it would require us to get grants. And of course, you have this other thing where, you've got to prioritize where your efforts are going to go, because you have a big job ahead of you with building a library. But I think I think what they're trying to do is, the Parks Commission is trying to fulfill their mission and work on the master plan. And of course, you got to start somewhere, and you got to get it on the list somewhere and make it a priority down the road.
Right.
And I think this is that first step.
So is everyone, I think we should have a joint meeting with the Parks Commission, have the discussion. I'm not sure how everyone else feels, but what's
Yeah.
your pleasure?
I think it's a good
If they're
idea.
requesting it, I would say so.
Well, I agree. But just, I don't want to just say, okay, we're going to have a meeting, right? So if everyone's agreeable, we'll have a work session, a joint work session with the Parks Commission at our next work session. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so just remember that that meeting probably will go a little bit longer if we have some other things on the agenda. So
You'll have the marijuana issue on that agenda.
Okay, so yeah, we'll have some discussion. So we'll have the joint Parks Commission agenda item first, if that's agreeable. Is everyone okay?
It's almost when you wish you had 2 work sessions.
True.
Yeah,
I know. We'll get there again, maybe.
those 4 meetings a month.
Yeah.
That it was supposed to be on 2.
They only last an hour.
It's only 2 meetings a month, you're fine.
Yeah, not much time, right? Carmen and Rob. All right. I guess that's the end of the agenda. My gosh, guys, less than an hour.
I just need to ask a clarifying question, if I may. I was approached today from an organization who wants to have a meeting with me to discuss operating the wastewater treatment utility. And I pretty much had said that ship had already sailed, that if you were to change your mind now to outsourcing, we would actually have to go out for a request for proposals, take those proposals, vet those proposals, and then hire someone and go through a transition. And I just want to confirm, I said that that decision had already been made and that you had already made a choice and we were heading down a path.
Yes,
I agree with that.
correct.
I think that was one of the choices, wasn't it?
It was one of the
And we
choices.
chose not to do that.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm ready to have all the information on our wastewater. I want all of it.
I think that answers my question.
Okay. Anything else by anyone? Anyone from the staff, council? Nate?
Just one more question on that. We did check to see if there was interest from any other source.
Well, there are other companies that do that. This is an organization that had expressed interest in the past.
But no,
A local company.
we didn't go out for RFPs.
No, I was just curious if we had any contact with
I
people.
had
just wanna
contact
make
with
sure.
one other that expressed desire. They didn't have operations in Oregon. But that was after the decision had already been made.
Yeah,
I
okay.
feel like if somebody really wanted to propose something, we were talking about wastewater treatment for a really long time. That had plenty of
Well,
time to
I
get in.
did not know that a wastewater treatment plant was being built 2 blocks from my home when all of this started. So I think stuff does pass through people. That's why I just asked.
Yeah, it's a good call.
You know, I mean,
Yeah,
the plant 2, you know, that's one of the reasons I came to a council meeting before I was a counselor, was because I'm like, wow, how did I not know that was going closer to my home?
now let's see, elbow deep in all the information.
Yeah.
All right,
We're on the inside, so we always know, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
After it's built.
In theory.
I have the paper coming home with me every night, so I stay on.
Thank you, everyone. Roger, this is just to support this Riverwalk?
Yeah.
Drew,
Yep.
I need you to
I
say what
signed
you
one
said
2 or
on the
3 years ago.
500 feet.